Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our sixth and our final week of the Mindful Healthcare Speaker Series, Resources for Challenging Times, brought to you by the Awake Network and mindful.org. My name is Rihanna Hoffman, and I'm an emergency room nurse with a background in oncology, hospice, and corrections nursing. I'm also a nurse coach and a meditation guide. And I'm streaming live to you today from New York City, where I've been for the last 3.5 months, first serving as an emergency room nurse at one of the harder hit hospitals in Brooklyn, and now working at an acute rehab facility where I'm actually working with patients who are coming off of ventilators and on their way back home. I'm so delighted to be your host today. In this speaker series, we've been hearing from leading mindfulness and healthcare teachers who are sharing their wisdom, insights, and practices to help us navigate this time. We have over 16,000 providers from over 60 countries around the world who are joining us for this series. So whether you're tuning in the morning, in the afternoon, or the evening, just a warm welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join all of us together here. You can use the chat function or the comment section at the bottom of your screen to introduce yourself, your medical specialty, and where you're from, just so we can get a feeling for everyone who's in the room. Today, it's a huge honor to have with us Susan Bauer-Wu. Susan Bauer-Wu is a PhD and is a nurse. Her career is just a beautiful expression of compassion in action. She began as a registered nurse working in oncology, hospice, and palliative care, and then went on to a productive academic career studying and applying contemplative practices in healthcare and higher education. At different points, she has held faculty roles at the University of Virginia School of Nursing, the University of Massachusetts Medical School, and Harvard Medical School, as well as Emory University. Susan is a longtime meditation practitioner and teacher, and is the author of a beautiful book for the lay public, Leaves Falling Gently, Living Fully with Serious and Life-Limiting Illness Through Mindfulness, Compassion, and Connectedness. Currently, she is the president of the Mind and Life Institute, helping to lead the way in the integration of science and contemplative wisdom to foster insight and inspire action towards societal flourishing. Susan, we are so glad that you're with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Rihanna. It's really, really a delight to be back with the Awake Network and to be with you again. And before we begin, I just want to acknowledge you for how you've stepped up and have been working and serving in the pandemic in New York City. You moved across the country to do that, and you're making a difference. And I think that's the real spirit behind working in healthcare, that so many people in healthcare rise to the occasion just as you have, but deep gratitude to you.
Thank you, Susan. It has been an honor to be here, and also means a lot to hear from you. I feel like, sort of going along with that in my own experience and being with my colleagues here and being a part of a listener on this speaker series. Obviously, these past months have been just a journey for all of us in healthcare and outside of healthcare. For those of us on the front lines, in the various ways that we've been on the front lines, it's just been unlike anything that we have ever seen or experienced before in any of our careers. Mm-hmm. And then generally, it feels like across the whole system, healthcare has had to evolve and adapt rapidly in terms of how it's being delivered and also received by patients. We've heard from so many different healthcare practitioners in all different roles. And the common theme, and certainly one that I've experienced, is this sense of constant pushing, that we are working in overdrive and overwhelm still to serve our patients and communities. It's just been turbulent. And it feels like while in many places in the countries, the number of COVID cases might be coming down, and lockdowns are continuing to ease, and cities are starting to open up. Healthcare practitioners are having to sort of pivot once again, where we're picking up the caseloads of the patients whose management was put on hold, keeping up with the ever-changing guidelines. And of course, there's this just palpable worry of a second peak. And certainly we're seeing those numbers rise in some of the southern states right now of the United States. You are deeply connected to the healthcare world. You are a bedside nurse. You're connected to many friends and colleagues and former students who are serving through these times. You're also a pioneer who has helped lead the way in integrating contemplative practice into healthcare settings, both in academia and in research. So to begin, I would love to just get your general perspective on where you feel like we're at right now at this time.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that depends on where you are in the country and the world right now, because I know that there are colleagues friends that I know that are in Arizona right now who are experiencing, and Houston, Texas also, that are experiencing what New York did about 2 months ago. And so I think that in places like New York, there's an exhale that's happening. And then other parts of the country and the world are ramping up. And there's so much uncertainty, which we've been talking about. Uncertainty is always there anyway, but we're facing this uncertainty, and we're traumatized by what happened in the last few months. Those that were working in healthcare in the midst of the crisis a few months ago, I believe are going to be experiencing PTSD. And in anticipation of the possible next wave, I think that that can be really, really debilitating, and can just create within our bodies, within our minds, this fight or flight or freeze that has always been a challenge and a concern in working in healthcare, because the stressors have always been there. But I think that we're just kind of amplified. So at this point in time, we're kind of navigating this, post-traumatic stress in a way. And we're also feeling really tired. And I think what's unique about what's happened in the pandemic and working in healthcare during the pandemic is that, in the usual days pre-COVID, we would work a full shift in healthcare. We'd give it our all. We put in a long, full day, do our best to get through the day. And then we could go home. We could get in the car, get on the subway, get on a bus, and just kind of chill, relax, get home, be with our families, and just be, right? And what happened and is happening is actually when you walk out the door, the stressors continue. There's this continuous vigilance and the need to protect your families, the needs to show up fully for all the different people in your life. And also the sadness, like many people in healthcare actually are living away from their families because they don't want to risk their families being exposed, particularly elderly family members who are most vulnerable. So I think that we're in a time of learning. We're in a time of bringing what we're learning into making this, either the next phase of COVID or the next phase in healthcare, or whenever another pandemic comes. We're in this place of learning, and I believe that we are, with each experience, we're bringing lessons learned that help us to be more resilient as individuals and also as systems. Also, we'll just say that I have also many friends and colleagues that are in leadership positions in running healthcare institutions. And I think that this experience was a really tremendous wake-up call for them as well. And I believe that there's the decisions that are being made and how the leaders of these institutions are actually looking at how they can better take care of their staff and better equip the institutions where they work is entering a really promising time.
So many of a number of the things that you've just talked about, including this insight of like previous to COVID, we could experience incredible stressors at work, but still there was a piece of like being able to go home at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And now in this very literal sense, not only do the stressors continue, but as you've reminded us, some of us can't go home. I myself have been living in a hotel room for a number of months. And even though I can connect with the people that I am close to over Zoom, I am far away from any of the things that I would normally do to de-stress. And as well with lockdown, I can't go to the things that I would normally go to. So a meditation place or a place to do yoga. And I certainly don't have my close friends to connect with. And what strikes me about what you've just said is that all the more so for those of us who are not travel nurses and who are working permanently in their staff positions because their families are just right there. And I know that some of them have not hugged their kids in months. They're choosing, as you said, to live away from their home, but they're still in their same city. Mm-hmm. And so it just must feel debilitating. And just it sort of furthers the sense of uncertainty and heartache that one sees at work. It perpetuates that when you go home, because you don't get to really go home. Mm-hmm. So thank you for naming that. And it just feels like a real part of our daily experience as frontline workers.
Yeah, I agree.
There's something about this notion of an uncertain future that you also brought up. And this piece about your comrades who are in administrative positions, where this has been a wake-up call, as you said. It feels like the well-being of healthcare providers had to come to the forefront during this time because our well-being was the most obvious thing that was sort of at stake in all of this. Not only our physical well-being, but our emotional well-being, our spiritual well-being. So it feels like the discussion of healthcare practitioner well-being got to come to the forefront in these last 4 months in a way that maybe it's never come to the forefront as loudly in medicine. And it's just become so clear how important well-being is. And when that comes to the forefront, the other piece that is obviously here, as you mentioned, PTSD, is this notion of practitioner burnout. And what's so clear as we see COVID moving around the country and around the world in different ways is that we have a long road ahead of us to a vaccine or to more herd immunity. However this is going to unfold, we have quite a road ahead. At the best of times, burnout and well-being are these huge topics in healthcare. And so right now it feels like they're even more crucial than ever. And I know that you've done a lot of work around provider burnout and well-being, and you have contemplated this subject very deeply on a personal and professional level. And I'm curious about any thoughts you have about how we can cultivate physical, emotional, and contemplative or spiritual well-being at this time.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. there are two key components that I think to addressing burnout, preventing, minimizing, or what I prefer to say is promoting resilience. And one that I'll begin with, and I'll just name it, we actually don't have a lot of control over. So I just wanted to name that. And that is basically the systems that we work in and the circumstances, the acuity that is part of the circumstances that you work in. We don't have control actually of those circumstances and those situations and those systems. However, what we do have is the ability to look at what we can do on an individual level as an individual healthcare practitioner, or even as a leader, to show up in ways where we can be our best selves. And I want to name that the healthcare systems and the challenges of the healthcare systems are absolutely real. I don't deny that. I think, the shortage of personal protective equipment is totally real, and it is an issue, and we need to address that. And the leaders need to address changing the systems. Our healthcare system was fragile before this. It was on the verge of breaking down before this. And the hope that I have is that this experience is actually going to cause the opportunity of kind of a breakdown where there can be there's new growth and a new way of delivering healthcare, and have there be environments where all of the professionals working in those settings and the patients and the families can actually be held in a place of wellness. And so to me, that's the hope and the promise, and I believe it's totally possible. But now let's go back to what you have control over, what I have control of. What can we do? What can I do to be most resilient during these times? And the foundational, I believe what's really foundational for long-term resilience in working in healthcare is staying connected with why you went into this work. Healthcare is a calling, whether you're a nurse, a doctor, physical therapist, a respiratory therapist, patient care assistant, any role, it really is a calling. And I think what generally has happened, or what happens, or what I've observed, is that the people who are experiencing burnout, which would be experiencing this sense of like you're not able to feel fulfilled, that you have the sense of accomplishment, that you feel drained and depleted, and basically instead of taking care of a whole person with a whole life and a whole story, you're basically just taking care of a diagnosis, a person, in a bed, that you don't have any appreciation of the fullness of their humanity. And the reason why purpose is so important to mitigating and preventing burnout is that actually nourishes us. It helps us to come back to why we're doing this work, which is work of service. It's deep, deep, deep service. Yes, there's reliable, there are jobs in healthcare. There's some financial stability depending on the actual position, but there's sustenance that comes with it on a material side, but much more importantly to me, there's a spiritual and emotional nourishment that comes from this work. And when you lose that, that's when we begin to not care. We become apathetic. And when we do that, we begin to check out. And when we check out, we begin to make mistakes. We're falling short for the patients and families that are entrusting us in their care. And that's where I actually think mindfulness practice and other contemplative practices are so important, because they help us to just kind of pause, to reset, to reconnect with what's most important, moment by moment. And it's really hard in busy healthcare settings to do that, but it's not impossible. And so it's this combination of bringing mindfulness into your work, sprinkling your day with these mindful moments, but it's also taking time, maybe when you're traveling back and forth to home, maybe when you wake up in the morning, maybe before you go to bed at night, but really taking time for carving out some formal practice time to just ground, to go from sympathetic overload into a parasympathetic state, to relax, to replenish, to renew. I'm not hearing. Now I hear you.
Okay.
I didn't hear you, Rihanna.
Oh, good. Okay.
Okay.
I'm struck by this this seemingly simple topic of original intention as having just very deep implications. And what you've highlighted so far is it doesn't only have these implications for us as providers or practitioners, nurses, and anyone who's working in healthcare and who's sort of receiving the energy from the world and from others. And that is the energy of some kind of gap and uncertainty in someone's life. That is the energy of suffering and anguish or pain in someone's life. That's what is inherent in healthcare, is that we are entering into spaces with those people and meeting that. And that means that we also meet that in ourselves again and again and again. And so I'm struck by this notion of original intention. It feels like returning to our own ground, and has these like possibilities of nourishment, like you said, because it is returning to our ground. And then the other thing I'm struck by what you said is that it has these implications for patient care, for medical errors to potentially be decreased as we continue to return to our ground and are less frantic. And as you said, sprinkle mindful moments throughout our day, as well as maybe have some kind of formal practice to ground. That our ability to show up and to be present and to attune and to attend to the activities that we're doing to a patient and with a patient actually have implications that hit a bottom dollar, that hit a bottom line of a business, and have real implications for the health and safety of patients.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of implications, you know, of not being attentive and present in our work and with our patients and families and colleagues. I mean, it shows up in ways where we're not listening fully. And through that, we actually can misdiagnose. We can disconnect from the person that we're talking to. And there's so many profound implications of that. And I come back to, when I talking to students about this in a very, very simple way. Just think about being with a healthcare provider who's actually listening, who's paying attention in a way that all of the procedures that they're doing are done correctly and skillfully, and they're not doing any harm, that they care about you as a whole person, versus imagining the alternative, which is somebody who's just sort of treating you just like not even a whole person, is rushing in, rushing out, really distracted about what just happened earlier that day or what they're going to do next. And who do you want to be taken care of by? If it was you, your parent, your child, your grandparent, who would you want to be taking care of you? And it comes down to sort of this simple fact that we all deserve to be cared for with big hearts, intelligent minds, and with great skill. And everybody deserves that every moment, every time. And I know it's a tall order, but we're basically, it all boils down to we're just taking care of one person at a time, one moment at a time. So how can we best, show up for those times? And that's right. I think the mindfulness practices are super helpful.
Maybe this is a good moment, Susan, if you would be willing to lead us in a mindfulness practice so that we can get sort of a felt sense of these things that you're talking with us about.
Sure, I would love to do that. So the practice is what, about 5 to 10 minutes?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, great. Thank you. So beginning by checking in with your body in terms of what position you're in. So getting into a comfortable position where you feel grounded, reasonably comfortable. Maybe even begin by just to get in tune with your body, rolling your shoulders. Just rolling your shoulders, bringing your shoulders up towards your ears and rolling back. We spend so much time in front of the computer, especially these days. So just doing some gentle shoulder rolls one way and then the other way. Really checking in and tuning into your body as you're doing that. And then bringing your shoulders up and just squeezing them towards your ears and just holding it there for a few seconds. This is an amazing practice to just increase the blood flow and relax the muscles. Not just relax, just gently shake. And taking a few full breaths in, maybe in through your nose, holding for a moment and fully exhaling through your mouth, if that feels right. Just doing that a few times in your own pace. Noticing the air as it's entering your body, filling your body. Noticing how it leaves. And maybe noticing the pause, that space between each in-breath and out-breath. just a moment of space right here, right now. And noticing your connection to the floor, to the earth, to the chair, whatever way you can feel grounded right now, noticing your feet, your sits bone. And gently checking in and noticing what's alive in you right now. Are there any physical sensations that are prevalent? Emotionally, what are you noticing? What's your mood? And what about your thoughts? Is there anything that's just really present in your mind? It's hard for you to shake, or just some random thought that's popped in. It's all okay. Just noticing that it's there, but not getting caught up in the story. Just more information for you to know about you, how you are, what's alive in you right now. Maybe if it's comfortable, bringing awareness to your heart region. Maybe you can even tune in and feel the gentle beating of your heart right now, the aliveness present in you right now. And if you can't feel any sensations with your heart right now, that's perfectly okay. But we all know what the heart represents. Heart represents courage and love. Compassion. And genuine care. So I'm going to invite you to participate in a brief guided visualization. Bringing to mind an actual experience, an interaction from your work in healthcare. And rather than it be like a general idea, a general time, see if you could get really specific. Thinking about the faces, the words, sense of touch, the setting. who is there. It may be with a patient, a family member, maybe a colleague, but a particular experience where you felt truly connected on a human to human level. It's as if you could see inside each other's hearts, where you had a glimpse that you knew the fullness of this person, and vice versa, that they saw that in you. What were the specifics of that experience that made you feel so connected, so alive? That you were actually cared for in the moment that you were caring for others. And noticing what's coming up for you as you bring that experience to mind. How do you feel? What's coming up in your body? What are you noticing? Maybe breathing into that, really taking a full breath in and out. What's coming to mind? What are you noticing in terms of your thoughts? And what about your feelings? How do you feel bringing this to mind? This one encounter of presence, of care, connection, is one of countless other encounters that you experience in your work, day in and day out. So just reconnecting with the experience of fully sitting, lying, whatever you're doing, just reconnecting with your body right now. And bringing the breath more fully and energetically. Maybe moving your shoulders again, loosening them up. And just remember that the anchor of present moment experience, as well as these memories of these experiences, are boundless resources available to you at any time. Thank you.
Susan, thank you. I have one last question for you. And but before I ask it, I wanted to let everyone know that we will have time for some live Q&A period at the end. And we'll be taking just a couple of those live video questions from you who are joining us right now on Zoom. So if you'd like to ask Ms. Bauer-Wu a question live and you know that you'll be available for the rest of the call, please write your question in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. The Q&A function is different from the chat function. At the beginning of your question, write the word live so that we know that you have a functioning microphone and camera. Then write your name, where you're from, your medical specialty, and finally your question. If we choose your question in about 5 minutes, you'll hear me call your name, and then you'll be brought on live, so please be ready. A window will pop up asking you to enable your camera and your microphone. Just click yes, and then you'll be on. So in a few minutes, please write in your questions. So my final question for you, Susan, is we all know that we are living through just an unprecedented and unique time in human history and global history. In addition to the COVID-19 pandemic and all of the economic challenges connected with that, we're also experiencing the intensity and the reality and history of racial injustice and the deep calls for change, transformation, and healing, which are just reverberating around the world. It's a time of tremendous chaos and challenge. And within that, we're also witnessing beautiful acts of bravery, connection, and love. And it feels like there are these potentially deeper layers of awareness and healing that are trying to peek through in the midst of the chaos. As the president of Mind and Life Institute, I know you hold a deep vision for the well-being of humanity and the planet. You have been deeply committed to eliminating silos in medicine, academia, and science, and addressing racial and ethnic disparities. In your January 2020 President's Letter, which interestingly came out just weeks before the pandemic began, you unveiled a new vision for the direction of the Mind and Life Institute. Among many things, you wrote about how you see a profound crisis of disconnection as being at the heart of so many of our contemporary problems. In addition, you hint at this urgent importance for all of us as a global community to deepen our insight into and understanding of this notion of interconnection and what that really means on deep levels. You go on to write that we seek nothing less than individual and societal transformation toward a world that embraces our shared humanity. So obviously this is a huge topic, but I wonder if you could speak about what interconnection means to you and why it's so important, especially in light of all that we're experiencing now. And you spoke of the things that you hope to see and the things that feel possible to you earlier within medicine. And I'm wondering if there's anything more you'd like to say about those senses of possibilities. What aspirations do you have for how we can relate with the crises before us in a way that within the difficult and tragic situations, that there can also be this sense of a possibility of a path toward societal transformation? So there's a few parts of those questions there. Please let me know if I need to repeat anything.
Oh, that's a big question. And if we have all afternoon, or we could spend days unpacking together. So I will briefly answer, and in the spirit of opening it up for some other question and answers, but it's a really, really great question. And clearly, as you made reference to our work with Mind and Life, we actually went through a very thoughtful strategic vision process that we finished the end of last year. And in January, we began to unveil it. And it is so like what's happening right now, what has been happening in the country and the world, just lifts up the importance of us recognizing that we are experiencing a profound, we've been experiencing a profound crisis of disconnection on every level. Maybe not every level, but many, many, many important levels. So to be clear, when I think about interconnectedness and this idea of interconnection, it's not like we're creating interconnection. The interconnection is already, always has been and will be there. Okay? But where we are and where we are as a human species is to recognize and to wake up to our true appreciation of the fullness of our interconnection. That who we are, what we think about, how we show up, what we notice in our relationships, what we notice about the systems, what we notice about the planet, that really matters. And so it begins, I really do think that, contemplative practice and mindfulness is really foundational, because it begins to help us to begin to recognize the interconnectedness that's already there. And once we begin to do that, just person by person, we can begin to foster a transformation that hopefully will last for generations, that the planet will survive, and we will, our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren will continue forward as with, all the other sentient beings on the planet. So it is, it begins with understanding our mental habits, maybe beginning to tune into our biases. It involves humility. Humility is big. Beginning to really tune in that we don't have all the answers. Individually, I don't have all the answers, but even I think as a human species, we don't have all the answers to know it. We do, if we leave into them, we do. But right now we don't have one single answer or answers that's gonna fix us. So humility is really important. And with that, we can begin to more fully listen to one another, to embrace our differences, to learn from our differences, to co-create solutions. But it begins with, I really believe it does begin one person at a time, and working with our own mental habits. And from there, we can, I think once we can really tap in and connect to that sense of interconnectedness, I think that's the space where love and possibility emerge. And I just want to say one thing about the connection, at least what's happening here in the United States, between the pandemic with COVID and then with the racial awareness that's happening in the demonstrations, and a lot of energy toward healing and reconciliation and changing our systems. The pandemic was, I think, a really great opportunity, and the social isolation and us just kind of simplifying our lives was a great opportunity for us to just kind of slow down and to naturally become aware, even without a mindfulness practice. Just because things changed, it was an opportunity to begin to shift our awareness. And so I think that we actually had greater sensitivity to be aware of the systemic racism and the ongoing challenges that have been around for hundreds of years. So I think what's different about this time, it's totally, in my humble opinion and in my deepest aspiration, that this is a moment of deep healing, and it's a moment of deeper understanding and doing things differently. And doing things differently means really changing our systems and really fostering equity in the fullest sense for all peoples. So, thank you.
Susan, thank you for that. Yes. What strikes me in what you've just said is a real balance of the love and tenderness that you hold as a person and as a professional for humanity, with your fierceness of vision. And I feel like the melding of those two things is what is deeply needed right now. So thank you.
Thank you.
We have our first question, and that is from Patricia Dobkin. She's from a medical school, and she's a clinical psychologist teaching mindful medical practice. Mm-hmm. And let her come online, and she can ask you her question at this time.
Great.
Hi, Patricia.
Hi. I'm home. We are in confinement here in Montreal. It's been hit not as hard as New York, but in Canada, this province and this city in particular has been hit the hardest. So my question has to do with post-traumatic stress disorder, because I'll be giving grand rounds at a hospital in about 2 weeks, and my title is When the Adrenaline Runs Out. Mm-hmm. And so it's 2 family doctors that I'm going to be presenting, and they pretty often deny their own mental health issues. So I have to tread very carefully about how they too are at risk. And I'm not quite sure how to help them with the potential for PTSD, because they're not very comfortable talking about, anxiety, depression, grief, and so on. They might be a little bit more open because it's just so obvious that everybody's confronted with these things, and this might be an opportunity to break through that defense of, am I going to go there for me? Like, here, I'm a family doc, I'll assess this in my patients, but don't ask me these questions. Mm-hmm. So I kind of know how to get them ready for the anxiety, depression, grief, and so on, but I'm not really sure how to help them prevent PTSD.
Well, first, Patricia, thank you for your great work. You have been a great leader in the field. I have admired your work for many years. So it's a treat to actually see you face to face and to be able to thank you. So thank you. And thanks for your question. I don't know, I don't have a magic answer for you. I mean, if you know this space really well. I think the only thing that comes up for me is, I think labeling something as PTSD, particularly to medical professionals, I think will put, it's diagnostic. Mm. And once you do that, they're going to say it's not me, and that's not me, it's somebody else. So maybe avoid naming that specifically, but maybe just lifting up more of the kind of the nuances and the realities of what is happening and what could happen. And to say, we're not totally out of the woods. We don't know what's going to happen. Whether or not there's going to be a second wave of this pandemic. And there's a likelihood, we understand from the expert, that there's going to be another pandemic at some time in our lifetimes. So I think it would be, if you're trying to connect with them, and to help them to begin to own and to touch into the fullness of their experience, so then they can minimize it from happening or getting worse. I mean, I think one of the best ways of preventing PTSD, well, first you can't be exposed to the stressor, but if you are going to be exposed to it, it's how you navigate that. And it's equipping them with skills so they're not so traumatized, if possible, to do that. So I think just doing what you're doing and teaching them skills now that will be valuable now could be helpful in minimizing the PTSD. I don't know if there's research to support that, but it just kind of makes sense to me.
Well, I pretty much put the presentation together, and this is why I'm asking this particular question, because I'm a bit stuck there. But by not naming it, I'm sort of colluding with their defense. And I think that we have to get past that defense and normalize that when people are exposed to this kind of trauma, over and over again, that it doesn't make them less adequate as people or professionals should they succumb to something like PTSD. You look in the military service, especially Marines and people who think they're very strong. Well, they're as vulnerable as anybody else, because we all are. So maybe if I just normalize it a bit more, rather than shy away from naming what they don't want to name. And like, I want to get past that defense with them. And so the whole presentation is about being proactive, recognizing that mental health consequences are likely, and that, okay, let's know that and face it rather than turn away from it. And then I'm going to actually give them little exercises along the way. So I won't be reviewing research much, as we usually do in grand rounds. And I'll tell them ahead of time that this is meant to be very practical. And so I'm going to give them little exercises to do along the way, just like what you just did, and just the whole business of relaxing the muscles around your neck and your shoulders and so on. So I'm going to put little pieces of practices in there, but these are family docs that may know nothing about mindful medical practice, may never have meditated. So I have to really be careful in how I present the tools so that it doesn't sound too esoteric.
You got it. You know what to do.
I do and I don't, because I'm really not one who treats people with PTSD.
Yeah.
So that sort of recognizes my own lack of knowledge. I mean, those other mental health problems I've been trained to teach or to work with, but PTSD is a little bit past my experience professionally.
I'll refer you and others to the work of Amishi Jha. Amishi is at the University of Miami, and a lot of her work, her research, and her teaching relates to intense, high-stress situations. And so a lot of her work has been with the military, and it's related to PTSD and minimizing PTSD. And I think that your instincts of normalizing what they're experiencing to other intense high situations could be helpful. And so I would refer you to Amishi's work, and actually was not expecting to say this, but I'll just put a plug in that yesterday we had a release of the Mind and Life podcast, Mind and Life, and Amishi was the person interviewed, and it's a great interview. So
I actually watched it.
Oh, you heard?
Because you see, I'm in confinement. I'm in my home office and I can't go anywhere. So I have lots of time to watch these things. And I did watch it. And so that's a good suggestion. But I think that I will try to normalize all of this so that they don't shy away, because this might be an opportunity that the mental health of healthcare professionals can really be addressed, because everyone can agree, yes, of course, who wouldn't be afraid, who wouldn't feel this kind of grief. And so it might be that this moment has arrived when it's okay to talk about these things.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Thank you, Patricia. Great to see you. Keep
And
up the
I'm
great
aware
work.
of your work as well. And, you know, we're all working together, and that's what's so beautiful about this.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Patricia. We have a second question, Susan, for you. This is coming from Karen Mott from Framingham, Massachusetts. She's an oncology nurse and compassion cultivation teacher. And Karen, I just want to see if you're able to come online at this time. Looks like she's on her way. Karen, I can see you coming up. Ah, there you are. Great. Welcome, Karen.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for taking my question and for offering this just such a lovely webinar. I so appreciate being here. And my question almost piggybacks a little bit on the previous question, and that is that you spoke at the beginning of the webinar of it's even more important now. It feels even more important now to bring this type of practice to healthcare providers, to caregivers in general. And what I am coming up against at the hospital that I work is getting the administration on board. And I think right now, during COVID, there's a lot of budgetary concerns. You know, there's even more budgetary concerns. So first part of my question is navigating that, you know, how to get administration or the people at that level on board about the value and the importance of offering these practices to our healthcare providers. But then the second part of the question is even getting the providers on board. You know, in the midst of their like very busy day and busy schedule, I've offered the compassion cultivation course to the residents at the hospital where I work. And with all of the time constraints, it's hard to get them to carve the time out in their day and really recognize the value of that for their lives, for their practices, for themselves, for their families, for their patients, etc.
Yeah, Karen, thank you for your question. You know, the most intense, high stress, busiest situations is not the time to introduce like a new program or a new practice. It really, it isn't. And so I'd say, you know, ride the waves. And if it seems like things are starting to open up and there's more space, that's an opportunity to begin to engage. I think that if you're trying to make a case with administrators, is that you have to be looking at some kind of incentivize, like realize the benefits to the overall system to doing it. And that there actually could be lower burnout, lower, you know, errors, lower turnover as a result, and then patient satisfaction can go up. That's kind of the simple business case for it. But I don't want to just end there, because this isn't really about the business case. You know, it's about something much larger, much bigger. Yet, in order to get an entree, and you need that. The other thing, and this is based on work that I did at the University of Virginia, and is still going on, is that you look at basically identifying some champions, if you will, some people who are already sort of on this journey that kind of get it and are looked at as valued colleagues and informal leaders or formal leaders in the particular settings, and work with them. You can't do it yourself. So that's the first thing I'd say, is that for any of you that are really interested in transforming the systems that you work, whether it's just one small clinical unit or a whole medical center, you can't do it alone. And you need to be, you know, having a community to support you, because there's going to be a lot of ups and downs as you're trying to do this. And I also think that there's more power in the voices and the energy of a group to make it happen. So that's my advice to you. And there's another point that I want to make, and I saw it pop up as a question or a chat that I just want to mention here. And it relates to the idea we've talked about post-traumatic stress. But there's also another really important concept called post-traumatic growth.
Mm.
And I do believe that that post-traumatic growth is as evident and as PTSD. And that post-traumatic growth is where we can actually experience a traumatic, having a traumatic experience. And then we actually go through that experience where we actually have greater meaning, greater connection, greater sense of agency, wholeness as a result of that experience. And I do think that that is something that has happened from the COVID crisis. And it also, I'll say from nursing colleagues that I've spoken to, working in healthcare has been traditionally a thankless profession. I would say, from being in nursing for 35 years, the amount of gratitude expressed to the nursing profession has been so much higher in the last 4 months than it's been in the last 35 years of my whole profession, at least from what I've experienced. Like, there's this greater appreciation for healthcare providers. And to me, that kind of gratitude that we're receiving is also something that is helps us to really grow through this experience, that we have this sense of being affirmed that our work is important. And yes, our work is important.
Yes, well, thank you so much. That's super helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Keep up the great work.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your questions. Thank you, Susan, for taking time. What an exciting thing to do live. Really appreciate it. We have just a few more minutes. And Susan, I'm wondering if there are any final words that you would like to leave us with.
I think I just gratitude to all of you for the work that you do. If we've been, the healthcare providers have been the true champions and angels, as well as the delivery workers and so many others. But I think that this is an opportunity, as I just said before, to just, reconnect with the value, the importance, the significance of what you do. And as best you can, move it away from being a real nebulous, big thing that your job, your profession, but bringing to mind and continuing to come back to the simplest of experiences that you experience moment to moment, day by day. There are gems and gifts available to you and reminders of how you're a gift for others. And so just stay awake to those, listen to those, and make sure you're taking time to sprinkle your days with these mini micro moments of pause, of love, of connection, of just sort of deep listening. So thank you. Be well.
Susan, thank you so much. What a perfect note to end on. You can, for those of you who are joining us right now, whether you're on YouTube or on Zoom, you can learn more about Susan Bauer-Wu's work and also the Mind and Life Institute in the links that we're sharing in the chat if you're watching it on Zoom, or in Susan's bio if you're watching it on YouTube. or on the recordings from the speaker series homepage. And just in general, to all of you, the last 6 weeks of the speaker series has been profound and powerful and moving. It's also been so wonderful to connect in real time with people and see the questions and passion and interest that we're all bringing together. It feels like a great banquet, and each of us are bringing our own dish that's rich with our own experience, and it's been wonderful to feel it unfold live. It feels like there's something really germinating there to do this together live. Yeah, so just thank you, all of you. Thank you, Susan. It's been a huge honor for, in terms of the series, it's been a huge honor for both Rena and I to be doing this as hosts. So to all of our audience members, all of the recordings from the series will be freely available on the Mindful Healthcare Speaker Series homepage for at least several more months. So please, you are welcome to watch any of the series that you missed. Continue to share them with friends and colleagues who may enjoy or feel helped by the series. In addition, we'll be sending out a special bonus session tomorrow in which Rena interviews me, and I talk about my experience as an ER nurse in New York City during the COVID crisis and the height of the pandemic, and also share how mindfulness practice helped me find resilience and my own strength and sense of connection with myself and others during that time. So you should be getting an email with a link to this session tomorrow or later on this week, so keep a lookout. And yeah, again, just my sincerest care goes out to all of you, whether you are on the front lines in a technical sense or working in proximity. Thank you to the permanent staff who are doing this day in and day out, who have watched their colleagues get sick and perhaps watched their colleagues leave medicine, perhaps watch their colleagues pass away. Thank you for what you do every day. To all of you, please stay safe and be well. Continue to touch in with yourselves and take care of each other. Thank you so much for tuning in to this series and practicing together. Thank you, Susan, again for being with us. And thank you to all of the speakers. Have a wonderful day to all of you.
Thank you. Bye.